in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we take an in-depth look at one of our most important sectors, the world of shipping.
The major challenge for shipping now is the so-called decarbonization. So we have certain targets to meet by the International Maritime Organization to remove the carbon from our emissions.
And after 4 years in Cyprus, we look back as she leaves on the tenure of the Dutch ambassador.
When I joined the walk, I thought, well, perhaps it would also be good to have a talk, because that is what I learned after having been here for about half a year, that there was a lot of mistrust, anxiety, and I thought, well, women could discuss that among them, and if we create a relatively safe environment, it would be good to express concerns and to discuss it.
As an island nation, Cyprus naturally has a very important marine connection, and shipping is a very big part of our GDP. Joining us on this week's programme is the Chief Executive Officer of the Cyprus Marine and Maritime Institute. He is Zacharias Shokoros, and he's going to tell us what it does. So, Zacharias, when was the institute formed, first of all? Because we had all the big shipping companies for years, but the infrastructure behind shipping, I think I'm right in saying, was somewhat lacking. And, of course, our energy hopes have made the whole area much bigger than it used to be. So will you outline for us what the Institute does and its aims, in effect, with regard to the wider shipping community?
Yeah. Well, as you rightly said, Cyprus has a strong marine connection, being an island in a very important geographical location in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have also a very strong, powerful shipping community, but we realized a few years back that becoming a maritime hub, it needs more than just shipping companies, ship owners, ship managers. It needs also infrastructure in relation to education and also research. And there we were behind. So 3 years back in 2016, actually, that's 4 years, we decided to submit a proposal under a specific EU program, under Horizon. The program is called Teaming, and the aim is to support countries that are underperforming when it comes to research and innovation in order to establish capacity. So we applied there in 2016. We managed to pass through the initial assessment, and we were given $500,000 to prepare the more detailed business plan and a proposal, which we submitted to the EU at the end of 2018. We were again assessed among 46 proposals from all over Europe. We were the only proposal in these sectors. And eventually in April 2019, that last year, we were among the 14 winners from all over Europe who received 15 million from the EU, and in our case, a matching, an equivalent amount from the government of Cyprus, plus a lot of contributions from the industry in-kind contributions mainly, but also in cash from local universities and industry organizations.
So what's the money spent on?
The money will be spent in salaries and infrastructure. That means we have 15 million coming from the EU, which will go primarily on the payroll of this new center. And we also have another 15 million from the government, which will help us build also our premises. We were also given a very nice plot on the beach of Mackenzie, Larnaca, where we are going to build our premises. We are also very close to the sea, which is among our aims. So the aims of the Institute is to undertake research and innovation in the areas of marine and maritime. That means everything that is related to the sea. So beyond the maritime sector, and the shipping companies, we are also aiming to address the sea as an environment, as a as a source of food when it comes to fishery or aquaculture, but also aspects like energy, marine energy coming either from the wind or the waves in the sea, but even the hydrocarbons in our case are located in the sea. So you may say that it's also a kind of a marine energy there.
So when you say research, though, I mean, how do you go about doing that when it's such a wide topic?
Yeah, so we have organized our institute in these various areas of expertise. So we will have a center which will be dealing with, for example, maritime digitalization, of how to use these new technologies to help our industry. We have another area which will be looking into marine robotics. We are looking from another center into marine observation, monitoring the sea and observing the sea, which is an area where we are again lacking as Cyprus. We ought to give to the EU a lot of data when it comes to the sea, and we didn't have the infrastructure and the capacity, so we are aiming now to fill that gap.
What sort of data? I mean, what are you looking at?
It can be quality of water, it can be all the parameters that need to be monitored, it can be microplastics in the sea, so both environmental, meteorological data, the currents and the waves in the sea, because having this data, it helps you model also the sea, and then you can also make predictions. For example, if you have an oil spill, you can predict where the spill will end up in your shore, and you can then try to contain it and address it before it comes shoreside. If you have somebody who went overboard from a ship or during surfing, if you know the currents and you have the model of that area, you can again more easily find him. So there are a lot of uses and a lot of applications for data that comes from the sea. In Cyprus, this data up to now was taken through various programs for a very short period of time, and then it was finished. We didn't have consistently systems to monitor the sea. Now we are aiming to do this, so we are working closely with the relevant departments in the government to establish this network where you can plug a lot of various systems and technologies and try to collect the data, which then can be used by the scientists to develop further applications. It can be used by the government to meet its obligations to the EU and other bodies, and of course addressing challenges like the climate change and all this stuff, which are very closely related with the ocean, because the ocean, it's the major regulator of the climate on Earth. So it's important that we know what is happening in the oceans.
Okay, research usually takes a considerable amount of time. When do you think you will start having results from some of these? Some will take longer than others, obviously, depending on what research is being done. Yeah. But I guess that it's important to get as much data as fast as possible so it can be put to use.
Yeah. Well, yeah. First of all, just to clarify, we are not aiming just to research. Research is being done for years also from the local universities, although not so much in our sectors, maybe with the exception of the Oceanography Center at the University of Cyprus. In Cyprus we have not taken advantage of these sectors. But we are looking also to innovation. Innovation means to produce something that has a commercial value as well out of the research. So in certain areas we may be collecting data with a long-term view of developing tools, but in other areas we are aiming to develop tools and with a certain value much earlier. So, for example, if we go into the shipping sector, out of the data that we have in our hands from the shipping companies that work with us, we can develop tools much more easier. So we can have products quickly.
So give us an example of products, for example, that are missing, that would make, presumably, the sector much
more competitive. And So the most important challenge for the shipping sector right now globally, because the good thing with the shipping industry is it's a global industry, so we are not addressing just local issues. If we manage to resolve issues for the shipping industry, they are applicable to all over the world. The major challenge for shipping now is the so-called decarbonization. So we have certain targets to meet by the International Maritime Organization to remove the carbons from our emissions. So the first step to reduce the carbons until you achieve the zero carbon emissions is to improve the performance of your ship. The shipping companies on our island, they have a huge amount of data by monitoring the performance of their ships over the years. The challenge now for us and for them is to use this data and find ways to improve the performance, optimize the performance of the ship. If you manage to optimize the performance, immediately you reduce the emissions. And this is the first step until the technology for using different kind of engines with zero emissions will be discovered.
Where does something like Galileo come in? Because the whole system that Europe has in place, I know that one of the things it does is by monitoring the currents in the sea, tell shipping companies that, for example, if they're travelling from Europe to America, they might actually be much better off going the longest way round and taking advantage of the currents to get them there faster and with less environmental impact. So how far is that able to be put into place in the Mediterranean, where the currents are not really the same, I think? We're a bit of a pond, aren't we?
Well, actually, in Cyprus we are missing these models of the currents, especially close to the coast. But in general, this data can help a lot in shipping. So what we are doing, we are actually working with a shipping company now, where you put the data of the ocean into the system. So you try to optimize the operation of the ship, the engines of the ship, with the data. But if you also have the data of the oceans and the currents and everything, you can also optimize the route of the ship. So if you combine all these optimizations, you can get much less emissions, and the ships also become more optimized in relation to their financial aspects. They can run the ship with less cost, which is again an advantage for the company. So this is something we are always doing with shipping companies, although we are a very young organization. Because of our very strong relation with the industry, we already have this kind of projects running with local shipping companies.
So where do you go from here? You've established yourself, you've got the funding. What comes next?
Well, we are now at the stage of recruiting. The COVID delayed the process a bit, but we are now recruiting the first people this week, actually. Last week we have also put a new advertisement for our researchers. So we are now employing mostly administrative staff. We are now running this campaign to recruit researchers. Until the end of July, we have open positions for all these areas that I mentioned earlier.
So what are you looking for? A university degree, a master's?
We are looking for masters, PhD, postdocs and everything. So we have open positions in the areas of marine observation, seabed mapping. We have in marine technology. We have in marine robotics. We have in digitalization, data scientists and machine learning engineers at all levels. So from junior scientists up to senior scientists, we are now looking for all this to start building our teams that will address all these issues that I mentioned.
And if anybody listening falls into the categories you've just mentioned, what should they do? You've got a website, I think.
Yeah, well, we have a temporary website which we are now improving, because we had a website during the proposal phase, which we are now using to advertise all these positions. So if somebody wants to look, if there is an interest, they can. Of course, they can always say Cyprus Marine Maritime Institute and search for vacancies. They can also search through our website, which it's called Maritech X, because that was the name of the project initially. They can also go through our recruiters. We are using a recruitment agency at this stage because we don't have our own staff yet, who are doing this. But I think it won't be a problem by CMMI to find the vacancies in the internet and apply. We are looking for as many applicants as it is possible. As I said, the marine and maritime sector was not an area with activity up to now, so we are hoping that also a lot of Cypriots who are working abroad as researchers in universities and so on, they will show an interest. We already have a lot of positive feedback from them, so we are hoping that we will have a lot of applications for people to come and work with us. And I think it's also an exciting field. We are not so much of a university ourselves, we are more closely to the applied research and more to the field. So we will be interacting also with the sea in projects which I think the young people will also find exciting.
Okay, so if you're interested in that, you can Google Cyprus Marine and Maritime Institute, CMMI. We've been talking to their CEO, Zacharias Shokouros.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
Diplomats worldwide, of course, come and they go, and they have different impacts depending on where they are and what they did while they were there. Well, we're saying goodbye this month to the Dutch ambassador in Nicosia, Nathalie Jarsma. She joins us on the programme to look back over her 4 years in the capital city of Cyprus. So, Nathalie, when you first came, what briefing did you have? What did you know about Cyprus?
That's an interesting question, and I actually said something about it to Minister Christodoulidis. I used to work on security issues back in The Hague before I came to Cyprus. So I was actually heading the department being responsible for NATO, but also European security and the OSCE. So EU security and the OSCE. And of course I had heard of the Cyprus issue because it was actually really difficult sometimes, because it had impact on the NATO-EU relations. And we tried to sort of find ways around it. And in my previous position, I was actually proud of being able to do so and hosting a certain meeting between EU and NATO countries, all informal, of course. But so that is, I understood a little bit the difficulties. And of course, apart from the Cyprus issue, I knew of the difficult relationship over the decades, even longer, between the Turks and the Greeks. Because I had visited Greece many times in my life. My parents were these people are these people who actually really enjoyed road trips. So we drove down to Greece and spent our summer holidays close to Larissa in the north. And I climbed Olympus when I was younger. But then we also went to Turkey on one vacation. Also, again, a road trip all the way from the Netherlands. And so
So you knew the area.
So I
and
knew
the
the area, exactly, yeah.
So you came to Cyprus and you very quickly made your mark, if I may say so, because there were particular issues that you grasped and reached out on. And I'm talking about bicycles and the environment. You've had several campaigns about that. And, of course, the gender issues, because the Women Walk and Talk and the support you've given for bringing the two communities here together, particularly through the women. Tell us about how those worked out and how you look back on them now and how successful they were.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Of course, also here some compliments go to my predecessor. I mean, the Women's Walk was already started before I came here, and so it was actually an initiative by two Cypriot ladies, and then the UN was being asked, so the predecessor of Elizabeth Spehar, to join, and actually my predecessor. But of course, when I came, I wanted to continue this, and as you know, Elizabeth was quite busy then with the negotiations, so we postponed it a couple of times. But then, in the end, we succeeded to restart the Women's Walk. And the last one when I came, it was always a group of, say, I believe 30 people or so. So relatively limited, but a group that was always there, sometimes newcomers, no obligations, so sometimes people didn't walk, but it was sort of the walking together. And then when I joined the walk, I thought, well, perhaps it would also be good to have a talk, because that is what I learned after having been here for about half a year, that there was a lot of mistrust, anxiety, and I thought, well, women could discuss that among them, and if we create a relatively safe environment, it would be good to express concerns and to discuss it. And at the same time, I would like to remind you that actually SEED, they did a great study about security and the perception of security, and they went beyond the sort of traditional perception of security, like military stuff, but they also addressed like economic security. And then they did a follow-on study on how women actually perceive security and what they would like to see in a reunited Cyprus and what their security concerns were. And that was a lot more about economic security. Will my children have a job? Will I be able to just freely walk around without being, harassed or whatever? So it were these kind of issues that were being addressed there. So we decided with the Women's Walk that we would also do a talk. So that was actually with the four of us that we decided that. So with the two Cypriot ladies and Elizabeth and myself. And that is how we took it forward. And I think then it started to expand a bit, it started to grow, the word was out, and the last one that we did was in Belapais. Previous Minister Kazolidis was kind enough to give a speech there and was very honest in terms of sort of answering questions, and I think everybody really appreciated it, and it was a big crowd. I don't recall exactly the numbers, but over 100, perhaps even like closer to 150, and like really nice balance of Turkish Cypriot ladies, Greek Cypriots, some brought their husbands or other men, that's all fine.
There was a good age mix as well.
Yeah, there was also a good age mix, exactly I was about to comment, because that has always been our concern, like that it was only the older generation, but we try to encourage people to bring in newcomers and especially the younger generation, and I think to have like an attractive place to visit. And of course Rita Severus is doing a great job during these walks and talks in taking us by the hand and explaining all these historic facts, and she's a great storyteller. I really love all those stories. It's beautiful.
Well, that was a great success, and I presume that you will hope that the person taking over from you in the ambassadorial seat will continue that.
Absolutely, and it helps that she's also a woman. That makes it easier.
That's interesting that you say that, because we do have at the moment several female ambassadors in Cyprus, and it's only relatively recently that has happened. We've mentioned this before when we've spoken, but very briefly, what do you think women bring to the diplomatic corps?
That's a difficult question. I don't know whether I can answer that spontaneously. But I'm a woman, so I can't sort of say anything in terms of.
But the approach
is a man.
The approach is different, isn't it?
The approach is sometimes different, but of course also certain men have certain characteristics and that are perhaps more feminine, if you were to call it feminine, and sort of more man like. But perhaps the approach to go for certain groups in society and to see that certain groups actually can make a difference without their political relevance, whether they are so big or have a great reputation, but just to see them and do things with them. I mean, yesterday I actually received a very nice compliment. A couple of ladies visited me, and I wanted to read from their thank you cards. They said, thank you, and then especially your interest in the small and quiet players who stand for the promotion of unity and welfare of all the peoples of this island. And I thought, that's a great compliment to see that there are these groups, both men and women, who really can make the difference.
It's the personal touch, isn't it? It's being on the level of people who perhaps don't move in diplomatic circles.
Exactly.
We've got to wrap this up very quickly. The environmental aspect and the bicycles. Obviously, in Holland, you've got bikes everywhere. We're only just beginning it here because we don't have all the infrastructure for a start. But your thoughts on that, because it's something now with the revamp of the centre of Nicosia that might take off.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy that the city of Nicosia has shown a lot of interest in our expertise on bicycles, and I mean we've shared really detailed technical expertise about how to design roads and sort of the cycle paths and what to do, what not to do. The way we have looked at it was more holistic from a climate action perspective, not only looking at bicycles, but more sort of holistically, and then making the link to spatial planning, to which of course the cycling belongs, but then also the energy transition and how to, for example, integrate photovoltaics into buildings, and how to inform architects what is out there, what is possible, what are the EU regulations, because we're all aiming for energy neutral buildings at a certain point.
And you've brought lots of people here during your tenure to give talks, informal talks, again to small groups of people at your home.
Exactly.
So it's spreading the word, I guess.
Exactly.
Last question, what will you miss most about Cyprus?
I think the friendships. I mean, Cypriot people are wonderful people. I've made really a lot of good friends here, and I'm also very... I know that I will continue certain friendships. And of course, as you said, I mean, diplomats come and they go. And I really feel honored that people who know that I will be leaving in 4 years' time, like 4 years ago, that they still wanted to invest in me, and not only as ambassador, but as a person. And that beautiful friendships have come out of that. And I know I will be visiting Cyprus, and I know some of my Cypriot friends will be visiting the Netherlands.
She will be back. You can be sure of that. That was the outgoing Dutch ambassador to Nicosia, Nathalie Jarsma. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.